A plane full of people is climbing over the mountains, everything calm. Suddenly both pilots go unconscious, and the plane turns straight toward a giant peak, losing height fast. A teenage girl takes the controls. She speaks into the radio, and on the ground, the entire control tower goes completely silent. Before you watch full story, comment below from which country are you watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more amazing stories. Maya Carter was 16 years old, and she was sitting in seat 14C on a small regional plane flying from Denver to a mountain town in Colorado. The flight was supposed to take only 50 minutes. Maya was going to visit her grandmother for the weekend. She wore a plain gray hoodie and jeans, and she looked like any other teenage girl on a normal flight. Nobody around her knew that she had grown up around planes her whole life. Maya's father, Daniel Carter, had been a private pilot for 20 years. He flew small planes over the Rocky Mountains, carrying supplies to remote cabins and helping search teams find lost hikers. He was known in his small flying community as one of the best pilots in the state. He never had a single accident in all his years of flying. He taught Maya everything he knew from the time she was 8 years old. She had spent hundreds of hours sitting beside him in the cockpit of his small Cessna plane, learning how to read the wind, how to watch the clouds, and how to stay calm when the weather turned bad. 2 years ago, Daniel died in a small plane crash during a storm. The investigation said it was bad weather and pilot error. Maya never fully believed that answer, but she had no way to prove otherwise. After his death, she kept flying with her uncle, who was also a pilot, whenever she could. She missed her father every single day, but flying made her feel close to him. She had earned her student pilot license last year, though she had never flown anything bigger than her father's old Cessna. On this day, the plane Maya was riding on was a bigger commercial aircraft, carrying 60 passengers. The flight started out completely normal. The plane climbed to its cruising height, and the flight attendants began serving drinks. Maya looked out the window at the mountains below, covered in fresh snow. She thought about her father, and how he used to point out different peaks and tell her their names. About 20 minutes into the flight, the plane suddenly started to shake. It was not the normal shaking of turbulence. The shaking was uneven, and the plane dipped to one side, then quickly to the other side, as if the pilot could not keep it steady. Maya felt her stomach drop. She had felt turbulence many times before, but this felt different. This felt like the plane was not being flown correctly. A few minutes later, the captain's voice came over the speaker. His words were slow and hard to understand. He sounded confused, almost like he was falling asleep in the middle of talking. He said something about a problem, but did not finish his sentence. Then the intercom went silent. The passengers around Maya began to whisper nervously. Some people thought it was just a technical problem with the microphone. Maya knew it was something much worse. She noticed a strange smell in the cabin, faint and sweet, almost like the smell of exhaust from a car. Her father had once explained to her that engine gases could sometimes leak into a plane's air system, and in rare cases this could poison the people inside without them noticing right away, because the gas itself often had no strong smell of its own. He had made her memorize the warning signs so that she would never ignore them if she ever smelled anything unusual while flying. Her heart started to race. She thought about the way the captain's voice had sounded, slow and confused. Those were signs of a mind that was not getting enough oxygen. Maya unbuckled her seatbelt and stood up, even though the seatbelt sign was still on. A flight attendant walked toward her quickly, telling her to sit back down. Maya spoke fast, her voice shaking but clear. She told the flight attendant that she believed the pilots were sick from bad air in the cockpit, and that everyone on the plane could be in serious danger if nobody acted right away. The flight attendant looked at her, unsure whether to believe a teenage girl, but something about the fear and certainty in Maya's eyes made her pause. The flight attendant used her emergency code to open the cockpit door. What they found inside was frightening. The captain was slumped forward against the control panel, completely unconscious. The co-pilot was still awake, but her eyes were unfocused, and her hands were moving slowly and clumsily across the controls, unable to do anything useful. The plane's autopilot was still partly engaged, but the aircraft had begun a slow, steady drop in altitude, heading directly toward a line of tall, snow-covered mountains that were now visible through the front window. Maya did not scream and she did not freeze. She remembered her father's words from years of training. He always told her that panic was the real danger, not the emergency itself. People who panicked made mistakes, and mistakes in the air could turn a small problem into a deadly one. She took a breath and moved into action the way her father had trained her to. She grabbed the oxygen masks from the small compartment near the pilot's seats and placed one firmly over the captain's face, then did the same for the co-pilot. Fresh oxygen would help clear the bad gas from their blood, but it would take time, and Maya knew there was no time to wait and do nothing else. The plane was still losing height, and the mountains were getting closer every second. She sat down in the empty pilot's seat, which was much too big for her small frame. She pulled the seat forward as far as it would go and placed her hands on the controls. Her heart was pounding, but her hands were steady, the same steady hands her father had always praised when they flew together. She looked at the instrument panel. The altitude was dropping. The plane's nose was pointed slightly downward, heading straight toward the mountain range ahead. She found the radio switch and pressed the button to speak, just like she had done dozens of times in her father's small plane. She said clearly that both pilots on the flight were unable to fly, that she was a passenger with basic flight training, and that she needed immediate help from the control tower to guide the plane to safety. For a moment there was only silence on the radio. Then a voice came back, sounding shocked and asking her to repeat what she had just said. Maya repeated the same message, calm and steady. In the control tower on the ground, an older air traffic controller named Frank Doyle stared at his radar screen in disbelief. The moment Maya's words came through the radio, saying that both pilots were down and that a teenage passenger was now flying the aircraft, the whole tower went completely silent. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Every controller in the room stopped what they were doing and turned to look at Frank's screen, watching the small blip on the radar that represented 60 lives now in the hands of a 16-year-old girl. For a few long seconds, the only sound in the tower was the low hum of the equipment. Frank had worked in that tower for over 30 years. He had guided pilots through engine failures, storms, and every kind of emergency, but he had never once heard a teenage passenger say she was now flying a commercial aircraft. He looked at his coworker, a younger controller named Elena, whose face had gone pale. Nobody in the room said a word for what felt like a very long time. Then Frank broke the silence himself. He told Elena to get every emergency team ready, because there was no other choice left. The plane was heading toward the mountains, and there was no time to send help any other way. Frank picked up his microphone and told Maya that he was going to help guide her, step by step, and that she needed to trust his voice completely. Maya answered that she understood and that she was ready to listen. Behind Frank, the rest of the tower stayed quiet, watching the radar screen in tense silence, afraid to say anything that might break his focus. Frank first told her to gently pull back on the control wheel to stop the plane's slow descent. Maya remembered exactly how this felt from her father's plane, even though this aircraft was much bigger and heavier. She pulled back with slow, careful pressure, not too much and not too little, the same way her father had taught her when they practiced together over the mountains near their home. Slowly, the nose of the plane lifted, and the altitude numbers on the screen stopped falling. Frank's voice, though calm, carried a note of relief. He told Maya that she had done exactly the right thing, and that now they needed to change her direction slightly to avoid the tallest peak directly ahead. He gave her a new heading number and told her to turn the control wheel gently to the side until the plane's nose pointed in that new direction. Maya turned the wheel with small, careful movements, remembering her father's warning that big movements in the air could throw a plane badly off balance. The plane responded, turning slowly away from the tallest peak, though other smaller mountains were still close on either side. Outside the front window, the mountains looked enormous, their rocky sides covered in snow and ice, close enough that Maya could see individual ridges and cliffs. She felt fear rise in her chest, but she pushed it down, remembering her father's calm voice from years of lessons, telling her that fear was normal but it should never be allowed to control her hands. She kept her eyes moving between the mountains outside and the instruments inside, just like he had taught her. Behind her, the co-pilot began to stir. The oxygen mask was working, and slowly her mind was clearing from the effects of the bad air. She lifted her head weakly and asked what was happening. Maya, without taking her eyes off the controls, explained quickly that both pilots had passed out and that she was now flying the plane with help from the tower. The co-pilot, still too weak to take over the controls herself, began to speak softly, helping to explain a few of the switches and displays that Maya did not recognize, since this plane was far more complex than the small aircraft she was used to. With the tower's directions and the co-pilot's weak but helpful guidance, Maya carefully steered the plane through the narrow gap between two mountain peaks. She felt the plane shake slightly as wind bounced off the rocky walls on either side, and she remembered her father telling her that these small bumps and pushes in the air could tell a pilot exactly where solid rock was hiding, even without being able to see it clearly. She used these small signs to make tiny corrections, keeping the plane centered between the peaks as it moved through the gap. After several long minutes that felt like hours to everyone on board, the plane finally cleared the mountain range. Below, the land opened up into a wide valley, with a small airport visible in the distance. Maya felt her whole body relax slightly, though she knew the hardest part might still be ahead. She still had to land the plane safely, and she had never landed anything bigger than her father's small aircraft. Frank's voice came through the radio again, steady and encouraging. He told her that emergency crews were already lined up along the runway, ready to help the moment the plane touched down. He began walking her through the landing step by step, telling her when to slow the engines, when to lower the landing gear, and when to extend the flaps that would help slow the plane further. Maya listened carefully to every word, her hands moving across the controls with the same careful precision her father had praised in her many times before. As the runway came into view, growing larger in the front window, Frank told her the most important part was coming next. He told her to slowly reduce power as she got closer to the ground, and then gently pull the nose up just slightly right before the wheels touched the runway, so that the main wheels would land first and softly. Maya's hands were shaking now, but she kept them steady on the controls, remembering every lesson her father had given her about staying calm no matter what. The wheels touched the runway with a hard bump, but the plane stayed under control. Maya used the brakes carefully, just as she had done many times on the small landing strips near her home, slowing the plane gradually until it came to a full stop on the runway, surrounded by flashing lights from fire trucks and ambulances that had been waiting. For a moment, there was complete silence inside the plane. Then the passengers began to clap and cry with relief, thanking every bit of luck that had brought them safely to the ground. The flight attendant who had opened the cockpit door came rushing in, tears in her eyes, thanking Maya over and over. The co-pilot, still weak but recovering, reached over and squeezed Maya's hand, telling her that she had just saved every single life on that plane. When the doors opened, paramedics rushed in to check on the captain and co-pilot, while airport staff and emergency workers waited to speak with Maya. She stepped off the plane onto the tarmac, her legs shaking from everything that had happened. Frank Doyle, the air traffic controller who had guided her through the entire flight, came to meet her in person. He told her that in over 30 years of work, he had never seen anything like what she had just done, and that her father, wherever he was, would be very proud of her. In the days that followed, investigators studied what had gone wrong with the plane. They found that a mechanical fault had allowed engine gases to leak into the air system feeding the cockpit, slowly poisoning both pilots without warning. Aviation officials praised Maya publicly, saying that her quick thinking and calm actions had prevented what could have been a terrible tragedy. News stations across the country shared her story, calling her the teenage girl who saved a plane full of strangers using skills she learned from her father. Maya did not enjoy all the attention from cameras and reporters, but she agreed to speak once, mostly because she wanted people to understand where her skills had truly come from. She told the reporters that everything she had done that day, she had learned from her father, a small plane pilot who had passed away 2 years earlier. She said that on that flight, it felt like his voice was guiding her hands the whole time, helping her stay calm and remember every lesson he had ever taught her. After the accident, Maya decided to finish her full pilot training, something she had been planning to do eventually, but now she felt a stronger reason to continue. She wanted to honor her father by becoming exactly the kind of pilot he had always hoped she would be, someone who respected the sky, stayed calm under pressure, and never stopped learning. A few months later, she began flying small planes again with her uncle, practicing over the same mountains her father used to fly, feeling closer to him with every flight. People in her town still talk about the day a quiet teenage girl took control of a falling plane and brought it safely through the mountains. For Maya, it was never about being famous or being called a hero. It was simply about doing what her father had trained her to do her entire life, staying calm, trusting her training, and never giving up, even when everything around her seemed impossible.